Our next speaker is Lora Park, and we met Lora last year. She happened to come to our conference 6 weeks after having her stomach removed. She's from Buffalo, New York. She is a professor of psychology at the University of Buffalo in New York. And I just want to welcome her. You can read about her in her full biography because I'd rather she speak than me talk about her. So welcome, Lora Park.
Thank you, Teresa and Katie, for inviting me to be part of this. Welcome to everybody here. I am so honored and excited to share with you my story. Share with you my story about my journey with stomach cancer. And as a psychology professor, I also do some research related to these topics that I wanted to share with you as well. So my story begins many, many years ago. I was born in Daegu, South Korea. That's my mom. That's me on the right, my middle sister. And it just so happened that my father got a job as a sociology professor at, actually, he was a grad student at the University of Buffalo, and my mom was a social work student at the University of Buffalo. So when I was 4 years old, we moved to Buffalo, New York, and my sister and I grew up in this very internationally diverse area where there's a lot of international students in Buffalo, New York. And I had a really wonderful time, great childhood. Ironically, the place I work at now, as a little kid, I went there with my parents, and I remember getting up on a chair and pretending to be a teacher, writing on the chalkboard, and now I'm working actually in the same building that my father used to be a grad student at. It was very hard at the time for my dad to find a job in the U.S. Sociology professors, it was hard to find that. So we ended up moving to Seattle, Washington, where we had some relatives. I went to the University of Washington. I got my undergrad degree in psychology. Afterwards, I went to the University of Michigan and was very interested in social psychology. So that's where I did my research, specifically focusing on motivation and self-esteem, relationships, well-being, mental health. And then the year I applied for jobs, there happened to be a job at the University of Buffalo. So I applied there. I went there. I've been there now for many years. Just became full professor this past year. So throughout my career, everything was going pretty well. Outside of work, I sing in the Buffalo Philharmonic Chorus. I have a family, husband who's here, 2 kids who are now 12 and 14. We love to travel. We love seeing nature. I love to do power yoga. I run marathons. So my life for many, many decades was going very well. I never had any health issues. I never took a Tums in my life. I had no acid reflux, no bloating, no stomach issues, whatsoever. But when I turn a certain age, you have to, in the US where I'm living, there's a tendency to get, just like you would get a mammogram for breast cancer screening, you get a colonoscopy. And so I just thought it was going to be a routine thing. My parents urged me to get an endoscopy, which I had never even heard of, but they said, your grandmother had stomach cancer. We didn't find out till it was too late. And your grandmother's sister also had stomach cancer. And because of the family history, you should get an endoscopy where they put a tube down your throat, esophagus, and they check your stomach. So I just thought this could be an easily tacked on thing to the colonoscopy. So I called the doctor and I said, could you also add the endoscopy while I'm under for the colonoscopy? And they asked me, well, do you have any symptoms of bloating, acid reflux, all this stuff? I said, no, I've had no issues. And over the phone, they said, well, then you're healthy, you're young, you don't need to get that. So I told my parents, I said, don't worry about it. Everything, they said, I don't have any symptoms. I don't need to get this screening. But my parents, stubborn parents, they kept pushing me and said, you should get it. Because I guess in Korea, they do some sort of like national screening and stomach cancer is more common there. And so it's just part of the screening process. And so they kept bugging me about it. And I literally called the nurse, the doctor. I said, my parents just will not let up. And can you just do this? So again, it was really difficult. So I ended up having to go in person to the office in order to get one-on-one consultation. They asked me the same questions of symptoms. I said no to everything. They kept saying, you don't need it. And then as I was about to leave, they said, well, where are you from? And I said, from South Korea. I was born there, but I moved when I was 4. So I've lived in the US my entire life. And they said, let's just double check. We'll give you this H. pylori test, which I had no idea what that was. They said it's more common among people who have of South Asian descent or people who've lived there. So it's a breath test. You just go to Quest, get this breath test done. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I did that. I did the breath test, and lo and behold, I tested positive for this thing, which I really did not understand. What is this bacteria, H. pylori? I told my mom, and she actually said, "Oh, your sister had this as well," but which I had not known. And then my sister had taken antibiotics for it, but she was allergic to the antibiotics, so she just stopped taking it, and she didn't follow up. And so I got on antibiotics, and because I tested positive for H. pylori, then the doctor said, okay, we will get you on antibiotics, and then we'll do the endoscopy to make sure that it's been cleared. So I went to get the colonoscopy as well as the endoscopy. Again, because I had no symptoms, I thought everything was going to be fine. But it turned out, and again, this is just like these random flukes, but that saved my life. The doctor who did the endoscopy, he found a very tiny part of the cardia, the top of your stomach where the esophagus and stomach meet. And he found this very small, like centimeters worth of inflammation. And he told me later he wasn't even going to biopsy because it was so small. He sent it to the radiologist. 2 independent ones confirmed that it was positive. So ironically, my husband and I were meeting with a life insurance person when I got a couple calls on missed calls. I tried to call back. I missed the doctor, so we were playing phone tag for a few days. Finally, he called me, or I got a hold of him, and he said, you've tested positive for cancer. And I think when he said that, my mind just went into like a practical mode of, okay, like, all right, just XYZ, this is what we do. Emotionally, it hadn't hit me. The shock of it all, what I was going to go through had not hit me yet. Luckily, Buffalo, there's Roswell Park Cancer Institute very close to where I lived. So everything got referred there, and they were really great. So I went to Roswell within a couple weeks of getting that positive diagnosis. I had an endoscopic ultrasound. Unfortunately, the diagnosis that I got was a very aggressive form. So it was stage 1. But it was signet ring cell adenocarcinoma, which was a kind of rare and aggressive form of cancer. And luckily, it hadn't metastasized at that point to other areas because it was caught so early. They did say that you should get genetic testing to see if you have the CDH1 stomach cancer gene because you have this family history. And that was in order to decide, should I remove the whole stomach or partial removal? If it was going to be positive, they would suggest removing the whole stomach. And if it was not, then I could decide, or we could decide as part of the treatment plan, what would be the best course of action of whether to remove part or full removal of the stomach. Throughout all of this, I think one of the things I learned is that as a patient, or even before as a patient, the importance of advocating for your own health, and also if you get a first pushback or a no or something like that, just keep pushing or try somewhere else. Even when it came to this thing I had never heard of. So there's something called the jejunal pouch, which it's made out of your small intestine. And they take part of your small intestine and they create like a mini stomach for people who have a full total gastrectomy. And I never would have heard about this. I just asked the doctor that I met at Roswell. I said, well, I love to eat. Is there anything that can be done to like increase the amount of food I could eat? And he said, well, there's this newer procedure that's being done more in Asia and other parts of the world, not as much in the US. It's a little bit more experimental or newer. called the J pouch or jejunal pouch. So I actually Googled it and I read some articles about it and I saw that it improved quality of life. So I went back and I said, I'd be interested in doing this. And he like drew pictures of how the intestine would be creating this mini stomach. And he said it should be able to hold more food and expand over time. And I said, like, sign me up. I want to do that for sure. If it's going to potentially lead me to eat more. Also, he initially had suggested the feeding tube because I was going to lose a lot of weight, and he said you need to supplement. I was kind of, I don't like the idea of a feeding tube, but he said we should do that. More later on about what happened with that. So yeah, throughout this entire process from start to finish or ongoing, the importance of patient advocacy, trying to reach out and gather resources online or through talking to other people. Now, this is a lot of just, facts of what happened, but ultimately internally, for those of you who are going through or have gone through stomach cancer, and also for the caregivers and the family and friends of those who have stomach cancer, it's a time of uncertainty. I mean, not just not knowing what's going to happen next, but just it's like an existential crisis of like reminder of death, mortality, and just the brevity of life. And so we had planned this trip to Alaska. We were supposed to go on a cruise in the summer because I found out like the end of July, and we had booked this trip to Alaska. So we're trying to figure out, well, should we go on this trip? Should we cancel it? What should we do? And it was actually turned out to be one of the best trips of our life. We ended up going because we had the genetic testing done, but we had to wait several weeks to get the results back. So there's really nothing we could do before the surgery could happen. Nature is like the balm, the cure-all for mentally, psychologically. And there's research actually showing that being out in nature, even seeing images of nature is very therapeutic. It helps to calm your nervous system. It helps to elevate experiences of awe and gratitude and things like that. So we had this wonderful memory-making time. And they had a great buffet at the Holland America in Alaska. So I literally gorged as much as I could prior to the surgery. The other thing, too, that was difficult during this period of uncertainty was I going to share this? Was I going to disclose this with, I did to my close family and friends, but was I going to share it at work? Was I going to share it with people in my field? And I've always been a very private person. So my first instinct was never, like, no way. Maybe after surgery, after I've recovered, after I'm all better, then I'll share it. Then I'll like be ready to do that. But along the way, there were several moments where I felt kind of pushed and nudged into the direction of maybe I should think about disclosing. And there's research in psychology showing that when you keep something secret, whether it's a mental illness, cancer, it could be something related to your past, being your sexual orientation, it can be all sorts of concealable stigmas or concealable aspects of yourself that it physically burdens you, like you estimate hills to be steeper, distances to be longer. It's physically harder for you to like move and do things. They've done these lab studies versus revealing or disclosing these hidden parts of yourself have been shown to be very beneficial in many ways. It reduces like thought intrusion and things like that. So some of the factors that led to the self-disclosure of this was I remember feeling emotional support from my family and friends, but nobody I knew had actually had their stomach removed. I knew plenty of people who had breast cancer. I had there was nobody, like a person that I actually knew that had their stomach removed. So I was in this state of feeling very alone and isolated because I needed social support beyond just my family and friends. I needed to talk to somebody who had actually gone through this. So I ended up just searching the internet for like websites of like stomach cancer. So I found My Gut Feeling. I found Hope for Stomach Cancer. My friend, one of them, she forwarded me this article from NPR written by somebody who had the CDH1 gene and like preventatively removed her stomach. And I Facebook messaged Camilla Rowe. Some of you might have heard of her story. never had met her, but I just found her on Facebook and I messaged her. And when Camilla responded back to me after she'd never heard from me or known about me, I remember sobbing and crying because getting that help from other people who went through a similar experience was literally like a lifeline for me. And the other thing too was that throughout this experience, I think the images that I saw in my Google searches were people who didn't like look like me. But Camilla, she actually I think is like Korean American. She has kids. She was around my age. And so I watched a video of her and I went and looked through all the videos that were there. I found this other person, Brittany Deffendorfer, and others that had gone through this. And so I had phone call conversations with Brittany and Sasa, and was messaging and texting and with Camilla, and they were so helpful in so many ways of just like, here are some questions you can ask your doctor to, am I ever going to be able to eat again? And they all said, yes, you will. And I said, am I ever going to be able to travel and just do any of my normal activities? And they all assured me like, yes, it might take some time, but you will get back to that. So they were the lifeline. They gave me hope. And I think that inspired me to be that person for other people. I think that was the impetus for me in some of my research. Ironically, before even all of this happened, I study self-esteem, and one of the things that we've discovered is that when you do things in the service of your own self-esteem, so if you're keeping things hidden because you want to project this image of yourself as being strong or confident and things like that, that's good for your own self-esteem, but it ends up sometimes isolating you or making you feel easily threatened or something like that. However, when you shift to more of this ecosystem instead of the ego system, you're more concerned about creating social support of how can you contribute your work to helping others? How can you find a way to connect to something that's larger than yourself? And it doesn't just have to be something spiritual. It can be something that benefits not only yourself, but it connects to other people and helping others. So that was, I think, the push that really helped me to be that person for others. And one other quick story about that is both my sons play soccer, but I remember being at a soccer game, and it was going to be the last soccer game for me before my surgery, but none of the parents knew. And I thought, because some of them were my friends, I should tell them that I'm not going to be here for like the next month or so. And so the referee blew the whistle, the game was over, and I turned to the parents and I said, I'm not going to be here because I have stomach cancer and I'm getting surgery. And I said it in a very matter-of-fact way. And me just saying those words, one of the dads, I could literally see him like sigh a sigh of relief, because he, for the past like 2 years, had been like a caregiver for somebody at work who didn't have any family or friends around. And he was taking her to Roswell. I think she had some kind of GI related cancer, to do the feeding tube and all these treatments and chemo and so forth. And me disclosing helped him to share his story of how he was the caregiver. And I saw him physically relax and like open up after that. So I was like, okay, this is the moment where now I have to share my story. So I did post on Facebook about it, and the flood of emails and texts and messages I got was overwhelming. So with this social support and with the physical like resolve to get through the surgery, I went and got my stomach removed last year in September. They created the J pouch to hold more food. Everything seemed to be going well, but then after I came home, after like 5 days, I don't know how long it was, a week or so, I had these horrible, like worse than labor pains, and I ended up going back into the hospital. They didn't really know what it was. It ended up being like intestinal obstruction or scar tissue or something. So they had to open me back up and kind of manually root around to clean things up. And it was at that moment that I said, please remove the feeding tube, because like I cannot be on this, like tied to this machine like 16 hours a day, and it just wasn't working for me. And he said, okay, if that's really what you want. And I was so happy when I got that removed. Um, so that really helped me. And then it helped me to start eating. And throughout this whole process, things that have really helped me was a combination of things that also in psychological research have been shown to be helpful. So writing about your thoughts and experiences, journaling, has been shown in research to be beneficial for mental health and well-being. Gratitude, that was something that I've always been a grateful person, but when you are sitting in a hospital, I ended up for the 2 surgeries, a total of 17 days being in the hospital. And you kind of forget in your daily life how much how lucky we are to be able to like just walk outside and feel the sunshine. And I remember the first time I took a walk with my husband outside, I just wanted to sit there on the bench and just feel the sunshine, because you just forget like the little things. Being outdoors in nature, wonderful. And even when I was in pain, and even when it was really a bit of a struggle, I always tried to go outside every day, even if I walked like half of a block, because I heard that walking is really good for just recovery and mental health as well. And then some of the hobbies that I enjoyed: music, yoga. I just did at home, watching some YouTube videos. Was very patient with myself. I'm a very efficient person, so it was very hard for me to like slow down and realize like I have to take it one day at a time, literally. And then also celebrating milestones, like 1 month post surgery or getting to my birthday. Family and friends were essential to helping. And I would say not just for me as the patient, but I think if you're a caregiver too, making sure that you have social support, whether it's a group or family and friends to support the caregiver, that is so important, because I think I can attest, like it really can burn the caregivers out, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. And so I think that's really important to think about. Oops, going the wrong way. Eventually, and again, before surgery, my entire life, my temperament has always been pretty agreeable and optimistic. So this was literally the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. And I've given birth, I've run marathons, I've done a lot of somewhat painful things, but this mentally was really tough for me, because part of me was like the hope. And I think having the social support and seeking that out, and receiving that and research shows that is like one of the strongest, most robust predictors of mental and physical health, is perceptions of social support. And for those of you who are out there, to have the hope, because I was able to go back to snowboarding, and I do power yoga every morning at 6 a.m., 7 days a week. And I remember when I first went back, like I could not even do a downward dog because my arms were so weak. And now, I can do handstands, and I can eat probably not all of that on the plate there. My first trip, after the surgery, was this conference. So that was like a year ago. At walking around Toronto with my husband, So this is just to show that you can live a full life, maybe a little bit different than it used to be. But I remember being here a year ago as an audience member, wondering like when or if, like, will I ever have a normal life? And I'm just here to say that you can, and it's really amazing. So that's my parents there. Thanks to them for helping me to get the endoscopy. I was able to travel to conferences. I probably went to like more conferences and giving talks at various schools throughout the country last year. But I think the most important thing in all of this for me has been to pay it forward. So the hope that I received and the support that I received, I want to be able to share that with others, to help others, not only in, somebody going through stomach cancer, but All of us are going through something difficult in our lives, whether it's physical or mental. And what my research shows, what the field shows in psychology, is that revealing, disclosing aspects of yourself that you feel are either stigmatized or you don't want to share with others because you don't want to appear a certain way or you don't want people to judge you or reject you. The research shows that it's actually the opposite, that by sharing your vulnerability, so like in my class, in the past, I would never have shared any of this, but we were talking about prejudice and stigma. And the last 5 minutes of class, I just decided I'm going to talk about my experience. And after class, I had literally had like a stampede of students come up to me. One kid came up to me and gave me a hug. He was crying and saying, I came out as gay like a couple of years ago, and it was really hard for me to like disclose that part of me. But I think you never know the ripple effects that you have of sharing your story and experience with others and what they're struggling with. I think this experience has helped me to have a new perspective on life and what's important. Your health is so important, not just maintaining it through like exercise and nutrition, but also through being an advocate and getting second opinions or pushing for that screening or asking for more information, talking to other people, the people in this room who are experts or who have gone through the process. And then also, I think at the end of the day, what's most important, I think, in addition to your health, is your close relationships. So the quality of your friends, your family, that's all I cared about in the hospital. That's literally what got me through this whole experience. And as I was doing laps in the hospital, and I could imagine my family and friends like literally cheering me on as I turned the corner and did these endless loops around the hospital. And so for those of you who are patients, some days you feel just really depressed, and some days you don't want people to be around. But if you're a caregiver, just know that even if we like reject you or say like go away or stop telling me to eat or stop nagging me, don't take it personally. We're just trying to get through it on our own. But I just want to thank the caregivers in my life and everybody's life, but also for the patients. Like accept it, because the social support is what's going to help you get through the experience. And then finally, as a survivor or as a patient or as a caregiver, think about how can I support and inspire others? And I think that is like the legacy of this group and all these organizations is that it's not just about your own journey and experience, but how can you ultimately help others, inspire others? And I did a podcast about this related to my research. But how can you plant these seeds everywhere you go so that people can be inspired and have a new perspective on life? So thank you.